Okay, everyone, let's continue with our next fireside session. We're joined now by Nick Maynard, VP of FinTech Market Research at Juniper Research Ltd. And our subject is From Hype to Reality, what AI is actually delivering in FinTech. A warm welcome for Nick, please. Now, Nick, this is a subject that we could have filled an entire day with, so we're going to try and get this into the next 25 minutes. Just to kick us off, though, just 30 seconds on you and your role, please.
Yeah, of course. Firstly, thanks very much for having me today. Lovely to be speaking to you all. Great topic. I'm Nick Maynard. I'm VP of FinTech Market Research at Juniper Research. I've been there for around 9 years now. We are a UK-based analyst house that focuses on covering the latest developments in the fintech and telco markets. And yeah, as part of that, we're very close to the AI space and lots to talk about here.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot to begin with because I'm a host and I'm allowed to. Let's dig into that true ROI of AI, and I say that slowly, not to trip over it. I'd love a example to start with, a tangible example of a fintech organisation that has really heavily invested in AI and it's delivered. What do you have at the top of your head?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's a few different examples here. If we take one that's been in the news recently, Bloomberg reported recently that Commerzbank, they invested around 120 million euros in AI, and they're expecting to see a 300 million euro return on investment on that. So I think that does initially show that there is potential. There can be return on investment on this, and I think it's a great question because actually we hear a lot of doom and gloom about AI, and we create some of this on our side. One of our sort of key stats that we roll out around AI is that up to and sort of around 80% of AI projects fail to sort of deliver something that works properly. Those proof of concepts fail. So it's definitely a great question in terms of return on investment. I think if you look at sort of specific tangibles, then actually I really enjoyed the panel you had earlier on this topic. And I think one of the themes that was important there, that is important here as well, is the shift from using sort of third-party vendors who use AI to more first-party and custom use of AI. And if we look at it from that perspective, in several different use cases, there has been a lot of tangible benefit from AI development. If we take the digital-only segment, so if we look at somebody like Starling or Monzo or Revolut, that digital onboarding experience, those banks have built their entire potential around, that is AI-based. That's AI doing the heavy lifting. They're screening those images that people are sharing. They're providing that strong user experience. So I think there's the big example in terms of the numbers. There's the sort of more general example in terms of actually what these AI has enabled as an area. And I think as we see that use of AI shifting from third-party sort of SaaS platforms to sort of banks creating their own AI, we're going to see even stronger return on investment from that, as banks will have actually more control over how they use that AI, and they can really customize that to their needs.
I think one of the most common usage areas for AI is a lot of chatbots, security, anti-fraud. That'd be the obvious answer to the second question I was going to ask. So let's skip that and jump on to one which is a bit more, how do you say, under the radar. The bit that isn't celebrated enough. The difficult second album, if you will. What do you see coming up in the next 3 to 5 years? What's going under the radar in terms of usage?
Yeah, of course. It's sort of related to fraud, so I'll skip over it relatively quickly. But the compliance area of a bank is probably one of those areas that is not overly sexy to sort of a third party, but banks spend an awful lot of money on compliance, and it's something that there's an awful lot of manual work involved in. Compiling reports, doing regulatory submissions, keeping abreast of different developments within banks and making sure that those risk positions make sense. AI is hugely helpful for that. And I think when we're talking about why we're going from hype to reality. One of the problems we've had in this market is this sort of concept of AI as the silver bullet. And it's not. And we can very easily say it's not. It doesn't solve every problem. What it does do is it works well in specific scenarios where you need to be able to repeat a process. And any process where there's a large amount of manual work, where there's something that can be automated, is being so. And we're starting to see that in things like compliance. I think we're going to see that accelerating. I know agentic AI was mentioned a bit earlier. And I think what that allows is actually AI to take on more advanced tasks, but also it really cuts down things like the training time and really enables AI to actually access more use cases. So I think compliance is the obvious one. I think from a more sort of broad workforce point of view, then actually roles throughout banks will be enhanced by the capabilities of AI. And I'm sure many of us in this room have sort of started using Copilot as part of their Office 365 experience, or they use these AI features in a day-to-day. So it's not even necessarily about different functions within a bank. It's all of the functions within the bank seeing sort of development. I think in broad terms, the sort of back office compliance roles will be the first to really see the biggest benefit. I think you mentioned chatbots, so it'd be remiss of me if I didn't have a little bit of a dig at chatbots.
I'll allow it.
Thank you. And we all know chatbots have been terrible. They still are terrible to a large extent. So actually their widespread use within customer service is still a little way off. New generative AI capabilities make that a lot closer to being useful. And I can inject some positivity here. I do think that some chatbots I've seen are definitely improving, but there's still a lot of terrible ones out there. So I think that's where we are in terms of we're actually seeing it go from a sort of large amount of sort of unfocused hype of, this is going to solve everything, to we're seeing those specific use cases come out increasingly.
Well, that gap between the hype of Gen AI and the reality, that's a thread I want to continue to pull on here, because there is that gap. And again, this is something we could spend all afternoon talking about, that hype and reality gap. Where do you see the biggest gap between hype and actual reality of what it's delivering within financial services? Where's the less of a chasm, more of a chasm rather than a gap?
I think there's been this impression with AI for a while that you can just point it at a task and set it off, and check back on it in however long, and something will have happened. A task will be complete. A process will be finished, some work will be done. And I think the whole problem in terms of the level of hype is that that's not a realistic evaluation of how AI actually works. AI is, and as I mentioned earlier, AI is great at specific tasks. You have to be really, really specific as to what you are getting it to do. And actually, in a very specific role, it can deliver a lot of value. I think, and I referenced our stat earlier about how many of those AI projects fail. And the biggest reason for that is because actually there's this disconnect between what sometimes the C-level thinks in terms of we need to do something on AI, to actually what the operational implications look like. So what does doing something on AI actually look like? And that's something that teams are increasingly grappling with. I think if we're sort of thinking about the areas where there's the biggest gap, I think customer service is an obvious one. And that's something that I think there was a period probably 10 years ago, and probably we were as guilty of this as any other sort of commentator in the market, but we're sort of suggesting that chatbots will take over. This is going to be customer service. Maybe, but not yet. And I think that what we're seeing is that actually the roles where AI is fully autonomous, that's way off in the distance. What we are sort of seeing now is AI as an assistant, and as a sort of a force multiplier, if you will. It enables one person to do a lot more because it frees them up from the mundane, it frees them up from the manual. That is the power of AI at the moment. But if you're sort of portraying or thinking that AI is something more than that, that's where the problems start.
I would also suggest a further problem that if you're an organisation that is now saying we should really do something with AI, you might be at the wrong organisation. Just a little footnote to our conversation, I would say.
They might want to invest in time travel so they can go back and start on it earlier.
Just possibly. I'm not sure how widely available that is in your current suite of technical products. Let's talk regulation for a second. As AI is becoming more integral, more embedded into everyone's tech stacks and workflows and so forth, there are big regulatory challenges there. From your research, from your perspective, how are fintechs really addressing those concerns? And I'll add a second part to that question. What are the signs someone's doing it right? And from your perspective, what are the signs people are making a bit of a hash of it?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I liked your Spider-Man quote earlier around, with great technology comes great responsibility. Paraphrasing a bit, but I enjoyed it.
Glad someone did.
Yeah, no, the reference was not lost on me. So I think that obviously banks and fintechs are heavily regulated, so that every bank has a risk appetite. I think it's safe to say that AI increases those risks. It adds new risks that banks haven't necessarily had to deal with. For example, governance as a topic is a really important one. If you're using AI in any decision-making capacity, how do you actually make sure that it's doing that in a way that is fair, that is equitable, that is free from bias? That means thinking about these things in a different way to how that's worked before. So I think that's a big change, and that's something that banks haven't necessarily had to think about before. I think in terms of the signs of it going well and the signs of it not going well, I think the signs of it going well are really where there's the acknowledgement of the issues. I think with AI, it's very easy to sort of sweep it under the rug and say, everyone's doing it. It's reality nowadays. The platforms will sort it out. The vendors have considered this. It's not a major issue. I think just bringing attention to that issue, thinking about governance and ethics, actually trying to ensure that, say, training data is free of bias. I think one of the signs that it's going wrong as well is when anyone claims to be AI first or AI-led, it's meaningless. And I think that's a sign that, certainly from a marketing point of view, that brand doesn't really understand what AI is or actually how that's to be used properly. So I think that's an important one as well.
Yeah, so that's a point I've made a couple of times on this stage over the last 2 days.
Yeah.
We all know plenty of people who do that, so we'll skip past that a little. Let's talk talent and skills, and this is why I'm always keen to have people such as yourself from a research or maybe from a consultation point of view on this stage, because you can take a little step back and have an overview of multiple organisations rather than being right at the coalface a little bit.
Sure.
Is what are the skills and areas that need to be within the workforce now to make the most of AI, and maybe what things are maybe taking a step back? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, of course. I think if you think about where we are in the sort of journey of AI, if I can use that rather terrible phrase, but essentially, and it is worth saying that every financial institution is at a different place in that journey. I think what we saw with early adopters of AI is either they were using it from a third-party vendor who did it all for them and it was just embedded within a function, say fraud prevention or something, in which case, other than knowing the language, not a lot you have to do. Or those early adopters were people who knew an awful lot about AI and they were very early on in terms of building models, building it into their processes. So I think from that point of view, from an early adopter point of view, at that stage, either there was the sort of skills needed were slim to none or very advanced. I think what we are having now is actually, as particularly as agentic AI becomes important, actually the sort of user interface, as it were, of AI becomes simpler. And having that conversational interface does make it easier. There does need to be understanding of what AI can and can't do, and actually knowing sort of the lingo and understanding how it works is very important. Prompt engineering is extremely important. It's true of people as well, but certainly true of AI is that you can get the right thing if you ask the right question, and AI is extremely important with that. And I think this is something we've done a bit of research on as well. We published a report with Zopa Bank recently that suggested that by 2030, around 27,000 jobs in the UK banking sector will be pretty affected by the introduction of AI, and there's going to need to be a sort of major reskilling initiative, which is something that Zopa Bank is picking up. And I think it's extremely important to consider that for the future of sort of the banking and fintech industry itself, but also wider society in terms of what that looks like. I think AI at the moment is really good at doing manual repetitive tasks, and I know we've already seen a lot of research out there around the impact this is having on internships or entry-level roles, or those kinds of things are sort of the most subject to disruption at the moment. But I think we're going to see, as AI becomes more advanced, that having more of an impact throughout sort of those organizations, and people having to adapt what they do on a day-to-day basis.
We're rapidly running out of time, and I want to ask you what is, I would say, borderline an impossible question. And
okay.
It's not the chicken and the egg one or anything similar to that. But
not Friday's lottery numbers?
No, if you could provide me those, I'd be delighted. The balance here between small players and the giants, is it weighted so there's advantage for a small player using AI to help close that gap, act bigger than they are?
Yep.
Or does the advantage lie with the big players, the established players? You can invest more in AI to accelerate further into the horizon.
Yeah.
How do you see that particular dynamic?
Yeah, that's a great one, and I think it's the point I would make here is there is some natural advantage to a larger business here because they can afford to buy in the tools. They have the time and the ability to sort of buy in those capabilities that they don't have themselves. That being said, the sort of best AI-enabled small business will be far better than the worst AI-enabled large business. So AI does create a more level playing field in some ways, particularly as we move into sort of an agentic world. And actually thinking about this, having that conversational interface does mean that you don't need some of those skills. You don't need to be able to train the model necessarily. You don't need to have a data science background to use this AI sometimes. And that does create a more level playing field. I think the availability of AI tools from a lot of third-party vendors is helping with this as well. Say if we look at the hyperscalers, for example, then they are building in AI capabilities and sort of AI workflows and agentic AI capabilities to their systems, which a lot of different businesses will subscribe to. So there's a lot of possibility there in terms of having access to new capabilities that they can then leverage. So it does help for a larger business because they've got the resources, but small businesses, it can actually be a real advantage, and where they don't have potentially that sort of manual sort of labour to do some of those really difficult, intensive tasks, AI can help take that off their hands. So it can be an accelerator, but whether you're a large or a small business, you need to have the right approach.
That was a deeply unfair question. I sort of apologise because that was a very good answer. Let me go to the room quickly to see if we've got any questions. We have one immediately at the front. Any others that will be coming in? We'll start over here first.
Thank you. Dipenjo Putra from Velocity Capital. It's a question really on regulatory arbitrage, the Brussels effect, and AI thought leaders. do you think there is going to be reg arbitrage taking place with high-risk functions defined underneath the EU Act, which could be the compliance and other KYC checking? And because we've got a light touch regulatory regime here in the UK, do you think we'd drift towards that and do some reg arbitrage? And are we going to be driven in that direction by AI thought leaders, in inverted commas, who quite frankly don't know what they're talking about?
The short answer, in my opinion, is yes and yes. I'll expand on that. I think, yes, we will likely drift towards a situation where regulators are more specific in what they are saying about AI and what the implications of using it in specific functions. And I think you are right. It's the sort of thought leaders, in inverted commas, within the AI space haven't helped that. I think the title of this one is From Hype to Reality, and again, as an analyst firm, I always have to apologise for the role we've played in this at times, but that hype has been somewhat damaging to the market in terms of the market has sold AI as this thing that can do everything, that can have an autonomous role, that can affect all the functions of a bank. I think regulators will be more interested in that, and if we're looking at some of the sort of risks to the sort of wider ecosystem and even some of the societal risks, I think that's probably a good thing in terms of at least setting some ground rules for how financial institutions are engaging with AI. But yeah, I definitely think that will be on the radar, and that's something that I would anticipate becoming more of an issue.
Thank you very much. We've got time for one other quick question, if there was anything from the room. That looks like a no for me. My final question, just in the last couple of moments, is...
Of course.
It's the future of the human and AI collaboration, which seems like it's been a real theme of the event over the last 2 days. How do you see that playing out? Where does AI stop and human interaction begin? How do you see that balance evolving?
Yeah, I think with the highly regulated nature of financial institutions, which of course we've just been talking about, I think there are limits to how autonomous an AI can be. And I think within this market, for that reason, we have seen AI being used in very clearly defined roles and in assistive roles. There's a fallback to a human operator. Say, for example, in onboarding, as an example, if the automated solution fails, then somebody looks at it. That I don't think is going anywhere for at least this stage, and I think this human sort of AI relationship will continue to be an assistive one. I sort of mentioned earlier the sort of concept of AI as sort of a force multiplier. And I think that's sort of the role AI will continue to serve, is it enables one person to do more. And that is by taking some of that manual load off. And, you don't have to sit there in Excel cobbling together that report from, 5 different spreadsheets. We've all done it, myself included. You don't have to do that anymore. You can automate that. So I think that assistive role is sort of how that human AI relationship is going to be for a long time. I don't think agentic AI will change that necessarily. I just think it will make it more useful as an assistant. I do think with the highly regulated nature and some of the problems AI has around things like explainability, then it will be difficult for it to move outside of that sort of set of capabilities in sort of the short to medium term. But yeah, I think it's an assistive tool, and I think it's something that is hugely powerful in that. But also, we need to remember that there is a reality to it, and it's not all hype, but it's not all the hype is saying either. So we need to have a balance there in terms of how we perceive AI.
And that is a wonderful way of wrapping things up. It's almost like you planned that last line. Did you plan that one?
No.
Well, it sounded like
in about superb. The last 10 seconds.
It was superb. Thank you very much indeed. Well, we've covered an extraordinary amount over the last 20 minutes or so. So everyone, a huge round of applause for Nick Maynard. Thank you.